Your choice reveals a recurring pattern, not because an object has magical power, but because the mind reaches for symbols before the mask has time to speak. In a Jungian test like this, what draws you in first often points to the way you protect yourself, the way you carry pain, and the hidden need that quietly shapes your choices. Sometimes we think we are choosing with reason, but the deeper self is already leaning toward what feels familiar, what feels safe, what feels unfinished. That is why Jung's test can feel strangely personal. A simple choice becomes a mirror, and in that mirror you may catch a glimpse of the pattern you repeat when life asks too much of your heart. So take a breath and look again. Do not overthink it. Just choose a safe from 1 to 5 and let your first impression lead. The fastest choice is often the most honest one, because logic likes to explain, but the inner world prefers to reveal itself through instinct, image, and feeling. Stay with the safe that pulled your attention first, even if another one seems more reasonable now. There is usually a reason your psyche moved before your mind did. And before we go deeper, pause the video and leave your name in the comments, because that small act gives the test a place to land in the real world. At the end, I will connect your choice to one concrete and practical action you can take today, something simple but real, so this does not remain just an interesting moment. Only then will the full meaning of your choice begin to make sense, because first we have to listen to the symbol, and then we can understand what part of you has been asking to be seen. What calls you now may be the very thing your soul has been trying to unlock in silence, not to expose you, but to help you stop carrying alone what was never meant to stay hidden forever. If you chose option 1, this usually happens when your soul has learned to guard its softness by wrapping it in heat, speed, and force. Pay attention to this, because the burning safe is not only a sign of protection, it is a sign of pressure that never fully leaves the body. Some people carry pain like ice, but people of this choice often carry it like fire, bright enough to guide them, fierce enough to keep others back. In a simple Jungian test, fire around a vault points to a self that values what is inside so deeply that it expects the world to invade it. Stay with me here, because the symbol is powerful. Metal means boundaries, the lock means secrecy, and the flames mean living on alert even when no danger is present. This is the shadow and the light together. The same inner guard that helps you survive storms may also keep your tenderness behind a wall of intensity. Jung would say that when a pattern like this appears, the psyche is trying to protect something valuable, yet the persona may start acting tougher than the heart truly is. That is why option 1 often belongs to the fighter archetype, not only the warrior who pushes forward, but the guardian who believes softness must be defended at all times. Maybe you grew up around sudden moods, harsh words, unstable love, or long periods of waiting for the next problem, so your system learned that calm could not be trusted. And once calm feels suspicious, intensity begins to look like truth, because at least heat is familiar, at least urgency feels readable, at least force feels prepared. Notice the loop here. You move fast to feel safe, then you stay tense because you moved fast, and then the tension itself seems to prove that danger was real. This is not weakness and it is not failure, so pay attention to that, because the gift inside this pattern is courage, stamina, and a rare ability to keep moving in chaos. You may be the one who stays strong in the family, the one who reacts first at work, the one friends call when things fall apart, and that is real strength. But the shadow appears when every small threat is treated like a fire alarm, when rest feels irresponsible, or when love itself becomes hard to receive unless it arrives in dramatic form. For example, someone forgets to answer your message, and before the day is over you feel the body tighten, the mind race, and the old story whisper that something is wrong. Nothing may have happened at all, yet your inner guard rushes to the door because it would rather exhaust you than let you be surprised again. Listen carefully, because this part matters. The deeper need beneath option 1 is not conflict, it is safety, not domination, but relief, not hardness, but permission to unclench. So the healing move is not to erase your fire, but to teach it a wiser rhythm, a rhythm that protects without consuming, responds without exploding, and rests without guilt. Today, when you notice yourself rising into tension, place one hand on your chest, lower your shoulders, and say in a calm voice, "I do not need to become fire to stay safe. Then delay your next reaction by 10 minutes and ask one honest question. What am I protecting right now, my peace or my old emergency identity? Stay with that question, because the answer may change the way you love, work, speak, and rest. And that is where the locked treasure begins to return as strength instead of strain. Your fire was never the enemy, it was a messenger, and once you understand what it was trying to guard, you can stop living in defense and start living in truth. And when you stop treating every silence as a warning, you create room for trust. And in that room, the hidden self can breathe, soften, and speak without armor for the first time in a gentle way today. If you choose option 2, this message usually appears when your mind has become the safest room in the house, and your heart has learned to wait outside the door. Stay with me, because this choice often belongs to people who look calm, capable, and clear, yet live with a quiet split inside. One part wants closeness, honesty, and relief. Another part wants distance, control, and enough silence to never feel cornered. The blue safe carries that tension beautifully. It is clean, precise, almost elegant, but it opens only through codes. In simple Jungian language, this is what happens when the persona becomes organized and competent, while the shadow stores the feelings that seem too risky to show. Desire says, open the door. Fear says, check the lock again. Desire says, trust this moment. Fear says, not yet, not fully, not unless everything can be measured first. That inner conflict can look very intelligent from the outside. You answer carefully. You think before you speak. You prepare, edit, and manage impressions. But pay attention to this, because what protects you can also isolate you. The light of this pattern is discipline, discernment, and the rare ability to stay steady in chaos. The shadow is colder. It can turn sensitivity into strategy and longing into delay. You may tell yourself you are being reasonable, while something warmer and truer keeps fading behind the glass. This is why option 2 often appears when a person has been hurt by emotional unpredictability. Maybe feelings once came with pressure, intrusion, confusion, or shame. Maybe the mind stepped in and said, I will handle this. I will keep things neat. I will make sure nothing uncontrolled gets inside again. And for a while that worked. It gave you dignity. It gave you structure. It gave you a way to function. But there is a small climax hidden in this defense. The same gate that keeps chaos out can also keep life out. The same code that protects your peace can stop love, truth, and spontaneous joy from reaching you. Picture an ordinary evening. Someone you care about sends a kind message, simple and sincere, asking if you are really okay. You read it once, then twice. You feel the answer rising immediately, raw and honest. For a brief second, the door is open. Then, the inner technician arrives. It edits the feeling. It searches for the safest tone. It turns one living sentence into 3 polished lines. You wait, rewrite, delete, postpone. An hour passes. The warmth is gone. What remains is control, and beneath that control is the old fear that if you are fully seen, you may lose your balance, your image, or your power to retreat. Pay attention here, because this is the heart of the symbol. You are not empty. You are protected. You are not distant because you do not feel. You may be distant because you feel deeply and learn to survive by translating emotion into order. That is why the practical step must be small, concrete, and real. Today, set a timer for 15 minutes, open a blank note, and write one honest message you have been avoiding, without editing a single sentence until the timer ends. It can be for someone else or only for you, but it must name one feeling, one need, and one truth you usually hide behind composure. When the 15 minutes are over, read it aloud once slowly, so your body hears what your mind keeps encrypting. Stay with that moment. The goal is not drama. The goal is contact. Because when you stop asking your heart to speak only in code, the locked part of you does not become weaker. It becomes available. And that availability is where the real change begins. And once that hidden voice is heard without correction, desire and fear stop fighting in the dark and begin to speak with honest warmth again. If you could choose 3, it is often because part of you still believes dignity is safer than exposure, and control feels kinder than the risk of being fully seen. This choice carries an old emotional logic, the quiet schema that says, If I stay polished, useful, and composed, I may never have to reveal how tired, uncertain, or hungry for warmth I really am. In Jungian language, the golden safe is not simply about value. It is about a self that learned to become valuable first, and visible only later. Pay close attention, because option 3 often belongs to the person whose persona looks calm, mature, and dependable, while the inner life stays sealed behind duty, etiquette, and silence. The light in this pattern is loyalty, depth, taste, patience, and the strength to hold a promise when others drift. The shadow is subtler, but it matters more than it seems, because avoidance can dress itself in elegance and call itself wisdom. You may delay a needed choice, not from laziness, but from a deep fear that one honest step will disturb the image that has protected you for years. Here's an unexpected twist. The very role that once earned love may now be the role that keeps love from reaching your real self. How safe like this shines with history, but history can become a room where no fresh air enters. Think of someone at work who is respected by everyone, always on time, always prepared, always saying yes to what is expected, yet who goes home carrying a private heaviness no praise can touch. They finish the task, answer the message, keep the promise, and still feel strangely absent inside, as if life is being performed well, but not inhabited. Or think of a relationship where you mean to speak honestly, but when the moment arrives, your voice becomes careful, polished, almost ceremonial, and the truth returns to its locked chamber. This is the schema of noble delay, the old pattern that says, I will decide after I am certain, after I am perfect, after I have rehearsed every outcome. But certainty keeps moving, and the door stays closed, and what began as self-respect turns into quiet self-abandonment. Stay with me, because this is where option 3 becomes deeply human, not rigid, not cold, but protective in a way that once made sense. Maybe you were rewarded for being good before you were allowed to be real, or maybe keeping standards was the only way to feel safe in a world that changed too quickly. See what happens next when the old persona meets a new demand, because life eventually asks for more than maintenance, it asks for presence. You cannot build a living future from postponed truths, and no commitment becomes meaningful if it remains forever elegant and never fully chosen. Today, choose one decision you have delayed for at least a week, set a timer for 15 minutes, write the exact promise you need to honor, and complete the first visible step before the timer ends. If the choice is a call, make the call. If it is a message, send the message. If it is a task, begin the task before your mind starts negotiating again. Do not wait until you feel pure enough or certain enough, because fulfillment grows from motion, and character is shaped by the promises you embody, not the ones you decorate. Once you act, the gold door begins to lose its spell, and you discover that steadiness is stronger when it is honest. The real promise of this choice is not perfection, but reunion. The moment your outer grace and inner truth stop living as strangers. When you fulfill one clear commitment, even a small one, the old avoidance loses authority, and the self behind the persona steps forward with quiet strength. Then the life you keep postponing can finally recognize you, and you can recognize it in return. That is your brave turn. If you chose 4, this often appears when control feels safer than surrender, and the fear is not only losing something outside you, but losing the version of you that knows how to hold everything together. Pay attention to that, because this choice usually belongs to someone who gathers, secures, manages, and prepares, yet still lives with the quiet suspicion that life can turn without warning. In simple Jungian language, option 4 points to a shadow built around scarcity, limitation, and the fear of change, where the hand keeps gripping not because holding is joyful, but because release feels dangerous. This pattern has a strange dignity to it, since from the outside it can look like strength, responsibility, ambition, or discipline, while inside it is often a private argument between trust and defense. You may tell yourself that you are being practical, and sometimes you are, but beneath that surface there can be a deep refusal to loosen your grip on a role, a plan, a person, or an outcome. You recognize this more than you usually say aloud, because you do not always chase things out of desire. Sometimes you hold them so tightly because the thought of change feels like a kind of disappearance. For Jung, the shadow is not evil. It is what the conscious self hides in order to survive. And with this choice, the hidden part is often fear itself. Fear that if you stop managing, something vital will slip away. Here is what this looks like in ordinary life. You keep saying yes to work you no longer want, yes to obligations you resent, yes to conversations you wish were over, because no feels risky and empty space feels worse. Or you keep saying no to a needed change, no to asking for help, no to ending what has already ended in spirit, because as long as the old structure remains, you can pretend the old fear is still under control. That is the hidden tension of option 4. Control promises safety, but the soul quietly asks whether safety bought through constant guarding is still safety, or whether it has become a cage that simply looks productive. You have done this in ways even you overlook, holding on to being needed, staying in motion so you never have to ask what you really want, collecting tasks and roles so surrender never gets a chance to speak. The painful part is that this can make you seem strong while leaving you exhausted, because every unchosen answer keeps draining energy, and every half-commitment teaches the nervous heart to remain on guard. And yet there is a gift inside this pattern, because you can build, protect, persist, and provide, especially when others panic. So the answer is not to become careless, but to stop confusing caution with truth. The turning point comes when you admit that surrender is not always loss, and that one honest no can protect your life more than 100 frightened yeses ever could. Today, choose one open decision that has been draining you. Set a timer for 15 minutes and answer it with a full yes or a full no. Then write one sentence explaining why and act on it before the hour ends. Do not refine it for another day. Do not soften it into maybe, because your peace will begin to return the moment your choice becomes visible. That is how this safe opens, not by force but by ending the old habit of calling delay a strategy when it is really fear wearing the face of responsibility. Once you see that clearly, the fear of change loses some of its power, and your life stops being guarded by limitation and starts being guided by choice. When you finally choose without hiding in delay, you do not lose yourself. You meet the self that was waiting beneath the grip, ready to live with less fear and more truth, at last with your full voice awake now. If you chose 5, this often appears when your life is already pushing against an old shape, and some hidden part of you is ready to break the order that once kept you safe. Pay attention to that, because option 5 is rarely about escape alone. It is more often about transformation, movement, and the restless instinct to become someone truer than the role you have been living. This choice usually belongs to people who can feel a door opening inside them, yet keep standing on the threshold, half committed to change and half loyal to the life they know. That is the tension of option 5. You want motion, but you also want the old world to remain available, in case the new one asks too much of you. In simple Jungian terms, this is close to individuation, the brave process of becoming whole by no longer hiding one side of yourself from another. It takes courage because growth never asks only for excitement. It also asks for integration, which means bringing fear, desire, doubt, and strength into the same honest room. People who choose 5 often sense this before they can explain it. They feel that the routine, the script, the old emotional contract, or the familiar excuse has started to die inside them. Yet the shadow does not vanish just because the soul is ready. The shadow whispers that if you move first, you may lose approval, stability, comfort, or the right to return to who you were. That is why this option carries a subtle inner command. Stop waiting to feel perfectly certain. Stop asking the future to arrive before you act. The new self is built by movement, not by rehearsal. Think of an ordinary week. You know you need to decide whether to leave a draining project, speak honestly to someone you love, or change the habit that keeps your mornings numb and scattered. You promise yourself that you will deal with it soon, after one more day, one more sign, one calmer mood, one better moment. But soon becomes later, and later becomes a pattern that starts to define you. That is the everyday scene of option 5. Not dramatic collapse, not grand rebellion, but 1,000 small postponements that protect the old arrangement while your deeper life keeps knocking from within. Listen closely here, because the established order is not only outside you, it is also inside you, in the voice that says stay recognizable, stay acceptable, stay in control, even if your spirit is fading. The firm truth is this: transformation does not begin when fear disappears. It begins when you decide that fear will not write the next page for you. That is why the action for this choice must be small, concrete, and irreversible. It should not be theatrical. It should simply prove to your own mind that movement is now stronger than avoidance. Today, send the message you have rewritten 3 times, or cancel the plan you keep pretending you still want, or throw away the one object that keeps you loyal to a chapter you have already outgrown. Give yourself 15 minutes, and within those minutes make the move visible. Once it is done, do not reopen the door in your mind and call that hesitation wisdom. Because the real break is not with a schedule, a habit, or a conversation. The real break is with the version of you that keeps asking for one more rehearsal instead of one brave act. And this is the subtle point hidden inside option 5. You are not being asked to destroy your past. You are being asked to integrate it, carry its lessons, and stop letting its fear decide the shape of your next morning. Once you make one irreversible move, the inner split begins to close. Courage stops being an idea, and individuation becomes something living. The quiet moment when your outer life finally agrees to follow your deeper truth and stays awake. What all 5 choices reveal is one hidden pattern. The quiet way a person avoids the very feeling that keeps asking to be seen, and then repeats the same defense until it starts to look like fate. That is why this kind of Jungian test feels simple on the surface and strangely personal underneath, because the symbol you choose is often the symbol your inner life already knows how to live through. In folk psychology and in Jung alike, a repeated choice is never only a preference, it is usually a compact story about protection, desire, memory, and the fear that change may ask for more truth than the old self can bear. Avoidance is the first thread in all of them, not because you are weak, but because some part of you once learned that stepping back, delaying, tightening, or hiding was wiser than being hurt in the open. Repetition is the second thread, the strange habit of returning to the same emotional door and hoping the old lock will suddenly open into a different life, even while the hidden fear remains exactly where it was. And beneath both avoidance and repetition, there is hidden fear. Not always loud, not always dramatic, but steady enough to shape posture, timing, tone, and expectation, until a person confuses vigilance with identity. This is where integration begins to matter, because the goal is not to shame the defense or crush the pattern, but to let the guarded part and the growing part meet each other without disguise. A symbol works in this way because the mind does not speak only in facts, it also speaks in images, and an image can gather years of silence into one fast instinctive pull before logic catches up. So if you reach this point, something important has already happened. You have not only watched your pattern, you have recognized it, and that recognition is an achievement because awareness is the first new beginning. You may still feel unfinished, and that is natural. But there is a quiet kind of accomplishment in seeing the mechanism clearly, because once the hidden rule is named, it stops ruling from the dark with the same force. Remember this simple line: the real test begins after this video, because understanding means little until it changes one choice, one reply, one promise, one pause, and one ordinary moment that you used to hand over to fear. Every option in this test points toward the same invitation. Stop living as if the old protection must run the whole life, and start meeting the future with more honesty than defense, more presence than rehearsal. Today, choose one place where you usually delay, avoid, or disguise what you feel. Set aside 15 quiet minutes and make one visible move that your old pattern cannot undo, even if the step is small. It may be a message you finally send, a boundary you finally speak, a task you finally begin, or a habit you finally break. But let the action be clear enough that your deeper self can trust it. Then let yourself feel the strange pride of someone who did not wait for perfect certainty, but stepped forward with consciousness, and in that small act opened a door the older fear never knew how to open. That is the new beginning hidden inside every choice here, not a dramatic reinvention, but a steadier union between the part of you that learned to survive and the part of you that now wants to live more freely. When you leave this video, carry that union into something ordinary, into the next call, the next silence, the next request, because transformation becomes real when it enters a familiar room. You have seen the pattern, and that matters. But the deeper victory is this. You can meet the same old fear tomorrow and answer it with a different self, with gentler strength and more truth now. Before you leave, do not let this stay only as a passing feeling. Please indicate your chosen number in the comments. Please type your name. Turn this moment into something real, because when you name your choice, you give your inner world a place to breathe outside silence. Maybe this touched a truth you have been carrying for longer than you admit. Maybe it showed you a fear you dress as caution, a longing you hide behind routine, or a strength you forgot was still alive in you. If something in you felt recognized here, do not walk away from that recognition too quickly. Keep the door open a little longer, like this. Subscribe. Not because this is just another video, but because some stories arrive exactly when the soul is ready to hear them, and sometimes the next message finds the part of you that this one only began to uncover. Stay close to what stirred in you today. Let it follow you for a moment after the screen goes dark. Let it sit beside your next decision, your next silence, your next brave conversation with yourself. Watch the next test on your screen right now. The answer you need may not come as a loud revelation. It may come as one more honest choice, and that choice may be the beginning of the version of you that no longer hides, delays, or waits for permission to become real. Do not tell yourself you will remember this feeling later. Life gets noisy, and the quiet truth returns to the shadows when it is not honored. Honor it now. Write your number. Write your name. Let your own eyes see that you were here, that you felt this, that you are no longer willing to leave your deeper self unspoken. There is a difference between watching a message and answering it. This is your answer. And if your heart felt even a small shift while listening, follow that shift. It may be small, but small honest movements open doors that force never can. One choice becomes a step. One step becomes a pattern. One pattern becomes a life that finally fits. So do not end here as the same person who only observes. End here as the person who responds. Then go forward while this feeling is still warm, still clear, still close enough to guide you. When you speak your choice out loud in the comments, you are not performing for anyone. You are meeting yourself. That matters more than you think, because the soul changes when it is witnessed with honesty. Let this be a quiet promise that you will not turn away again. Carry this truth gently into the rest of your day, and let it keep choosing you.